Hey, welcome back to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. I'm going to do something interesting today. I'm going to give you Bobby Fischer game. Yeah, whatever. He is playing Marchand. Marchand is white. Fischer is playing the black pieces. This is the English opening. Let's see what happens when Bobby Fischer is confronted with the English opening. This is what happens. They both move their knights. Oh, horror. Now, Bobby's going to fianchetto. And the interesting thing is, so is his opponent. So this will be interesting to see how they go about fighting for the center using their distant pieces, yes? Bobby wants to immediately castle. Let's just get tucked away, safe and sound. Now his opponent is going to fianchetto the other side as well. This is interesting. It doesn't necessarily affect a castled king negatively to have a fianchettoed bishop in front of the king when he castles, because that bishop is a terrific guardian of the king. Now here we see an interesting contrast in styles. Fischer is going to occupy the center with pawns, and that is one legitimate way to influence a center. His opponent is going to he's going to exert influence, I should say that, with his long-range pieces. So this is going to be a very interesting comparison contrast. D3, solidify the center, again touching the central squares, certainly. The knight is touching this one and this one, so on and so forth. Bobby is going to continue developing, and now his opponent's going to castle properly, so this is all a really good setup for your setup. Bobby wants to remaneuver some of his material because of the nature of the opening, and that's all fine and well. Queen to c2. Now Bobby is truly using his pawns to gain space, and he is going to occupy central territory, not just influence it. So this is going to be very interesting. His opponent bumps up to d4 to put a little bit of tension in the center. And there's a few ways that you can work on the center with the tension. You could develop. You can keep further developing, because you can see Bobby's not really super developed. However, Fischer proceeds to press the pawn. Very cool, very interesting. So he's going to force his opponent to rearrange his material, and now Bobby once again. Notice so many pawn thrusts in this game. Now, if you're just going to push pawns to push them willy-nilly, then that's not good. Fischer has a reason for pushing the pawns, and we'll see that as we keep going. Solid center with the pawns, yes, very cool. Queen, he's going to bring out another piece and develop. His opponent's going to keep bringing out pieces, and now another pawn thrust. Very interesting. Fischer, in later years also, loved to ram the pawn down the h to disrupt the castle king. Let's see what his plan is here. Notice his opponent doesn't really bother with any of that. He continues to bring more pieces into this game, and Fischer, once he got started, keeps going. Now, instead of, and there's an exception to every chess rule, I promise. Every chess rule was made to be broken. Instead of worrying about development still, Fischer is going to go ahead and push that all the way down. And yes, it does. I mean, technically, his cover with the pawns on his castle king is blown all the heck, but he's using his pawns as missiles. And this is interesting to see the effect of this. Whoops. The queen is going to come to e2, and c2. No, wait. Oh, criminy. is it? Queen is going to come to e2, and h is going to take the g. So, I mean, you put the thrust all the way down. Go ahead and take the pawn. You notice his opponent didn't bother taking the pawn. That would have really messed things up. That would have left him with an open, all kinds of shenanigans. Let Fischer begin the attack, and then you can still maintain a pretty decent palace around the king. I mean, it's not like that exposes the white king yet, but we'll see. Fischer is going to rearrange his knights, as is his opponent is going to rearrange his knights. He wants to continue the development, certainly. And now his rook comes to b1. Yeah. King h7. Fischer is going to take advantage of this less than stellar move. And how he does this is interesting, because it takes Fischer a couple of moves to yet again improve his position. See, Fischer basically, by running the pawn down on the h and disrupting the white king side moderately, he is now going to play position chess. It's about position, not piece count. So let's see how this affects this. And now the knight will bump to d1, and the rook is going to come over to h8, and now the knight is going to come to f2. So again, the white king is certainly comfortable, and now Fischer puts his king back so that he takes the partial open h file, putting pressure on the h pawn. So this is going to be interesting. Rook will come to e1. Fischer wants to rearrange again his piece. See, neither side is attacking either side. So they're both kind of spending time to rearrange things. And that's perfectly fine. That doesn't put either one of them in overt negative danger at all. Knight h3, and now the f6. So you can see, yeah, he blew it with the cover of the king, Fischer did, with his pawns, but there's no danger because he still has the palace. And the pawns are being backed up by the pieces. Were you to do a kingside attack, that's the way you want to do it if you're going to press those pawns. So we're seeing Fischer do pretty good here. And now the knight to f4. What an outpost. Now, true, it's not a permanent outpost at all. But that's a great position in order to help coordinate your pieces, either on defense or offense, if you want to attack that king. That is a great outpost at this point. Fischer knows this, so let's see how he handles this. Now the rook will come to f1. He puts the rook across from the queen. Yes, there's a bunch of stuff in between them, but that wasn't such a good move for this reason. Fischer has set it up so that, and we know he's in the mood to press his pawns, yes? Well, here we go again. His king is covered, so he can use these pawns as battering rams, and he really gets going here. Knight h3, he does chase the knight off. We can see that was going to happen. But now watch what Fischer does. He proceeds. So now he's got a lot more space, and his pawns are just kind of sort of menacing his opponent's position, and yet there's a real important thing here that we want to see. That is really important. As you press pawns, you leave holes for your opponent to occupy. Because Fischer's pawns have advanced so far, they can no longer chase that knight away. That's a permanent outpost. The only way to get rid of the knight now is going to be exchange it. And this kind of helps change your strategy in the process of, as you advance your pawns, you not only leave weak squares behind you, but you create holes for your opponent. You also create outposts for your own piece. I'm just pointing that out. Yes, of course, the bishop and the queen and the rook have that covered. He's not going to put anything there right now. No, but it's the principle of the way, the nature of how pawns work that is illustrated so cool in this game. It's really interesting. And now here comes Fischer. Knight g5. Because, one, the pawn is not going to be able to chase off that knight because he's got an en passant option, and this pawn is gone. So, true, it's not an outpost with a pawn backing it, but that knight is perfectly safe, and he does begin to put pressure on the king, enough to where he comes up to f2. Very interesting. And now here comes the rook. He's got the partial open file. Clobber that h file, or I mean, clobber the h pawn. His opponent will react. You're not going to just give Fischer that file, right? And so Fischer proceeds. Interesting here. He'll take, he'll retake, and now it looks as if Fischer has handed over the h file to his opponent because Fischer handed the h file over to his opponent. So this is interesting. Now it's switched. So how are they going to utilize this to their advantage? Fischer is going to yet again rearrange some pieces. There's no real direct threat or attack to either king, so they are playing position. And that's what we're seeing in this game. We're seeing a lot of extra piece movement before full development. Since there was no attack, it's all good. Yes? Notice how Fischer exchanged that wonderful knight. Actually, his opponent did the exchange because he doesn't want to mess up the option of having that as an outpost again for his other knight. So, Fischer got rid of one powerful knight. Yes? Let's see what else happens. The bishop's going to come to a3 now, and Fischer is going to press forward with the d5, challenging the center because Fischer has both bishops. Bishops like open boards. Yes, they're more effective because they're a long-range piece. Let's see how his opponent handles this. He presses the c-pawn. He did not exchange. What this does is it closes down the center. So, for both players now, the bishops are at this junction very ineffective. They're limited. The knights can hop over pawns to get up into various holes that the pawn structure has created for Black's knight or for places for the White knight. Black's knight. So this is interesting how he closed the board, and it somewhat changes the dynamics of the game. So Fischer's going to come over here to queen c7. His opponent's going to go to d2. And now Fischer wants to, again, the ineffectiveness of the bishops, but he wants them to be put on a better square than they are, and his opponent follows suit. The bishop's not going to do anything here. So there are better places to put the bishop, or create better places to put the bishop, right? The knight comes up to a5. Look at this. Fischer's looking at pressure in this little guy now. Very interesting. At the lone on the king's side. So, yes, he's guarded right now, but it's still putting pressure on him. So, he's rearranging his scheme. So does his opponent. And now he'll rearrange the bishop a little bit more. The queen's going to come back down to e1. His king is going to come to g7. His king is going to come over here to e2. And Fischer finally gets his other rook. Interestingly, his opponent, in order to help guard that pawn, brought his rook back off the h-file, so Fischer went and grabbed it again. Kind of cool to see, isn't it? Queen f2, And king g6, Fischer is coming all the way up with this king. The king is a fighting piece, even though really truly they're in the middle game. The kings usually don't come out until the end game, because, I mean, it's not like that king is exposed. He's got a palace all the way up into here, a little island, as Yusupov says to create, so it's okay, but that is one more piece into this game instead of sitting back. Kind of interesting to see how early he's bringing him out to make him a fighting piece on the side of the board where most of his power is. So this is kind of cool to look. He also gave himself the ability to reposition his knight by bringing the king in. He can now take his knight off the rim and put his knight on a better square. But because he's not being attacked, you're saying, well, I mean, how many moves did it take him to do this? 3, 4? It's all good because no one's under attack. This board is closed. So now playing position chess, oh, you've got to put him in the best positions. That's what we're seeing here. It's really well done. Kind of cool how this works. The king is going to come down to d1. And again, this knight is going to centralize into the central squares, which is really important for him to do. The knight wants to make sure he remains flexible, and now Fischer does something cool. b6. Okay, the board has been closed, right? And the bishops have been limited. There is an option to open it up, and Fischer now takes that option. So his other bishop, his opponent's bishop, is going to come up to e2. And the bishop to g5, again we see the repositioning idea. The rook wants to come to f1 here, and now interestingly, Fischer comes back. Knight g7, knight wants to come to g2, bishop will come to e6, and finally he pulls the trigger. White takes the tension off of the wing here, but Fischer's pawn material, the way it's structured, is more useful for him to open up the board. Let's see how he does this. The knight is going to grab that real good outpost again and check the king. Now the bishop will take the knight. And that's excellent, because the knight will end up being the stronger piece in this closed position. So yes, he gives up the bishop pair. I know a lot of people say, no, keep the bishop pair. Not in this instance. With this position, that knight could have been very bothersome. It's better to lose the bishop in this one. Just one, though. Not both, but one. And now his compensation appears to me to be that he's got yet more mobility on the wing. And he can blow this open even more for his bishop. We'll see if this is true or not. His opponent helped him. Whoops. His opponent helped him open the bishop, open the position here. So, okay, with the position being open now, Fischer can just steadily march and pressurize his opponent into a cramped position while he himself gains better space, which means more maneuverability. Let's see how Fischer does this. The bishop will bump down, and Fischer's relentless. He keeps advancing. Boy, this is something else. This is a pawn roller. Bishop b2, and he didn't see the danger here. d3, he got the bishop. See, the cramping that was caused against the bishops by the closed board position allowed Fischer to open it up from the wing and march forward. Because the bishop is cramped and it can't maneuver very well, it's now lost. That's excellent chess. Right through the center. So, I mean, you have to do what you have to do. You can take the G-pawn. You get some bare compensation for losing your piece, but now we have a passed pawn. You gotta watch passed pawns. I'm not kidding. The energy of both players just have to go to passed pawns. So this is going to be very, very interesting. Bishop pawn F5. What a great pawn fork. Not really. The bishop will just take it. And now, he wants to exchange the knight. Yeah, he'll get something out of it. Now, the reason he wants to exchange the knight, of course, is because the rook and the queen comes up into here. Man, that's deadly, right? Does Fischer begin to react? I mean, this is somewhat of a lightning bolt move. You have to take the bishop, otherwise you're going to lose your rook, and then, of course, you're going to lose your bishop, and he's going to have the entire initiative. Fischer doesn't worry about any of that. He does it this way. What a fantastic way to guard that bishop. Very interesting. So, Fischer allows himself to not exchange because of the position. See, this is why we always want to try to practice reading the chessboard to see the position. Now, he saves the bishop by putting him on A1. And again, we have a situation of a passed pawn. And all energy goes to that passed pawn. That is the most powerful piece on the board. If it advances much farther, Fischer wants to help it advance. Fantastic! Now there's your lightning bolt move. Wow! Now his opponent has to be saying, oh crud. Yeah? So the bishop will come to C3, but it accomplishes too little too late because Fischer is pressing the passed pawn. In building support for that passed pawn, then you push. And it's here that white resigned. So that was a phenomenal win by Fischer, wasn't it? That was fun. But wait, don't go away. I have another fantastic Fischer game to share with you. I'm going to be right back. Go get some popcorn or something. This is intermission. Intermission. Hang on, I'll be right back. So, in this second game, Fischer is playing Nash, and he is also going to play black in this game too. And he's going to play the Sicilian. So let's see how well Fischer does with the Sicilian. He got really good with the Sicilian because, of course, there's so many king-pawn openings, right? Fischer's opening repertoire was not magnificently broad. He just laser focused on a few openings and absolutely outmastered everybody, and that's what made him so doggone great, is he kept at that. And so he was a tremendous force in the chess world all the way up to world champion. Did I tell you that? Yeah, he won the world championship. I don't know if you knew that or not. We'll see that later on as I get through all of his tournament games. Yeah, news, right? Old news, but news anyway. So, here comes Fischer with the knight development for sure, and his opponent is going to develop. Nash is not going to waste any time. Fischer wants to secure his edge here. The bishop g5. Now it's not a pin yet. Fischer makes it a pin, but the purposes is because he wants, in this game, he wants a small yet secure center. And he's got it. That's a beautiful setup for a small and secure center. His opponent likewise is going to keep developing, and now Bobby puts the question to the bishop. Do you exchange? Do you move back and maintain the pin, or do you do something else? His opponent does come to here, e3, and now Bobby comes to here. Now, again, every rule in chess is made to be broken. We'll notice that Bobby's lack of development is really serious here. What is he doing? A one-piece attack cannot win. This is all true. So let's keep our eye on this. This is interesting why he's moving this knight again when really it doesn't benefit his cause. His opponent's going to take this opportunity to reposition his own knights, and now Bobby shows what he's thinking. He will take the bishop. Very interesting. What this accomplishes now this is really early in the game. Fischer is already planning on a positional game here. What he's doing is he wants his bishop pair. He does not want his opponent to have a bishop pair. That tells us automatically that he's going to attempt to keep the board open, which means he's not going to allow the center to get locked like happened in that previous game I showed. He doesn't want a bunch of pawns in the center and a bunch of pieces in the center clogging the center. He wants the long diagonals, right? So let's see if he can manage to do this. His opponent, meantime, does not want an open board. He's not going to want one. And sure enough, here comes the knight. His opponent's going to prepare to castle without question. So is Bobby. Now, at this point, truly, you got a castle, and both players do. It is time to tuck the kings away in safety, which they do. Something seriously advised by all grandmasters that I'm aware of, and I'm aware of at least two of them. Watch what Bobby does. Ding, 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 b5. Now, there's no direct attack just as of yet from either player, on either player. The center is relatively fluid. However, Bobby is going to begin a side attack, a wing attack. What is the response to a wing attack? A central, either a central attack or a central developing move. Yes, notice what his opponent does, f4. Very nice, that's the correct response. Does Bobby begin to attempt to fight off this central thrust? The nice thing about this is it gives white better space. So this is great development, right? This is a great response. No, Bobby does something very interesting. He'll bring out his bishop. Well, I hope I'm doing this right. Yes, and now he brings his bishop up. And now Bobby will come to knight a5. Notice how Bobby is continuing his wing attack. It's very, once he started it, let's go, baby, go. Let's go all the way through with this. Bishop's going to bump back down to e2. Keep an eye on this side. All of his forces, the partial open file in the center, and all of his forces are keeping track of this wing. So, I mean, technically, Fischer's not going to get away with too much, right? This is the theme. Look, rather than exchange the knights, Fischer puts the queen on an outpost. A nice little tickle on the queen. It's not a crisis. The queen's not going to be lost. But rather than exchange, Fischer wants the outpost. Why? Interestingly enough, his opponent responds by taking the knight with his other bishop. Something that I think personally helped Bobby rather than his opponent, because he retakes, and then of course the knight will come to d2. So we have a game where Fischer has both bishops and his opponent has both knights. In the position at this point, Bobby has the ability to keep the board relatively open. So I think at this point it's his advantage. He's going to want the open board for his bishops. And preferably a file for a rook. Yeah. Let's see how he handles this. He's going to bring his queen out to c7. Now, notice this diagonal, and this is heads-up play. You don't want to leave your king and queen on a diagonal when your opponent has both bishops. True, at this point, it can't happen that the queen gets skewered to the king by the bishop, but why take the chance? Forward-looking as his opponent is, now is a good time to put that king on h1. Get rid of that potential future threat. You didn't lose a move here. You're preventing a disaster. So this is heads-up play here. And now Bobby is going to grab a file. He said, oh hey, I've got an option here. His opponent's going to put the rook here, and now Bobby grabs the other one. And these are partial open files, but wow. Now we know the pawn structure is better for white than Bobby's on this wing. So Bobby is taking the battle to his opponent's power side. Because of his pawn structure being weaker, it opens up the B file, partially, but it opens up the B file for Bobby's rook. Very interesting how he does this. His opponent will react in a defensive maneuver. Now this tells us Bobby's plan is in an initiative phase. His opponent is beginning to react in a defensive phase. Let's see if Bobby does anything about it. You bet he does. Here comes the A-pawn. He's on this side. He's going to push. He's going to push this side. He's going to develop this side. His opponent, rather than fully succumbing to reactionary chess, begins his own attack in the center. Again, that's a proper response. Very cool how this is working. Bobby doesn't want to begin to just react to his opponent, so he proceeds on the wing. Really cool how this works. His opponent, likewise, does not want to react at this point to Bobby, so he maintains his own moving in the center. Very cool how this works. Again, what it does is it does break up Bobby's three-pawn structure over here by his king, but he's still got two pairs of two pawns together, which is a decent response. The F-file is open. White has that F-file. That could be significant. We'll see. We'll see. Excellent defense chess. Let's just stop this little guy right now. Why let him continue on and disrupt your pawn structure on this wing? There's no point to doing that, so let's just stop it. Good chess. That's good. Queen will centralize. Not only that, he gives his opponent an option. Do we keep the ladies on the board, or are you going to swap them? He does swap the queens. So the power dynamics shift. I want you to notice this. It's real cool how this is. it shifts all of a sudden because Bobby exchanged the queens here. He no longer has something up here, does he? Bobby's opponent. Yet, Bobby definitely has something over here. Very cool to see. How do we work this? How do we work this? The knight's going to come over to A2. Okay? He's going to double the rooks on the B file. And it's true that his pawns aren't together. He's got pawns next to each other, but not directly, while his pawn structure is still better. So Bobby wants to do something about it. He no longer has to worry about anything over here. He can focus all of his attention here. That's kind of slick how that worked out, isn't it? Through the exchange of the queens. So there are advantages sometimes of taking the real powers out if your position will justify you exchanging off the queens. In this instance, it does. And it's real cool how he does this. And, again, heads up defense. That's a good post. The knight, and it's far better than being on the rim, right? So he's stopping the doubled up rooks from being very effective. That's one great way to shut down an open file, is just block it. So what do you do in this case? Well, he has an ace up his sleeve here, though. He's got this guy now, and he can, again, disrupt the pawn structure. Yeah, now this will be interesting to see how his opponent reacts to this. He brings his other knight tickling the rook. So Bobby has to get his doubled rooks off, and now his opponent puts a sweet fork on him. Kablam! Knight to A6. Fork the rooks. Well played. Really cool. Those blasted knights, right? Tricky little beasts. You gotta watch them. Watch Bobby's solution. Okay, so you've lost the exchange here. There's no question there. What's his solution? Dynamic, direct power move. Not passive, power. Oh, you want my rook? Well, it's going to cost you. Fantastic. Well, you did put the fork on it, right? So you best carry through. Okay, you win the exchange. This is a beautiful example of you win the exchange, but you lose the position. Rather than piece count, position chess can win also. Let's watch. Doubled pawns on the C file, right? So the knight to safety, no harm, no foul. Fischer pushes the pawn. Woohoo! Okay, now, it's true, when the doubled pawns get blockaded, they can become a weakness, but it's much more drastic if they're blockaded way back here, or even here. These pawns, however, are very, very well advanced, and they're doing a screaming job. So Fischer has 3 pawns into White's territory. Yeah, it's doubled and blockaded, but there's a chance for Fischer to get rid of that blockade. This is a dangerous situation for his opponent. Really interesting. So here comes the knight. Tickle the bishop. You forgot about the bishops, didn't you? Don't worry about it. You're not going to be able to for long. Here they come. Notice again, Bobby has been playing on the wing. Yeah, he's been focusing all of his strategy and tactics on the wing in order to battle on the wing not the center, that could potentially close off the board and limit the power of his two bishops. You want an open board. One of Bobby's strategies appears to have been fight then on the wing. Isn't that cool to see? Yeah, let's keep watching this. This is really cool how he does this now. So, yeah, you got to take the rook. You do. That's actually probably the only option at this point. Now, relax. He's got this covered. You know, Bobby's not going to just queen just to let it get taken, right? So he's got the queening square covered. It's not, I mean, it's a crisis, but it's not a complete disaster yet. But now watch. Nice move, really. Heads up defense. Because why let Bobby connect the two pawns? Make one of the powers, make one of the pieces babysit that pawn. Don't let a pawn babysit a pawn that's one square away from queening. That would suck. So, yeah, heads up chess. Push the, and now look what Bobby does though. See again, the power of the two bishops is just overwhelming. Because now he skewers the knight and the pawn. And you go, well, that's not that big a deal. All you have to do is drop the knight down here. But if Bobby does that, there's the win. Yeah, so Bobby acquires another piece is what happens. Yeah, he can't afford to move that knight. So, again, the passed pawn, all of the energy of both players end up by that passed pawn. It has to. That's virtually forced. That's why he lost the knight. There is no other play. So the bishop will take, very happily so, of course. And the rook, yeah, take that guy. He's caused enough problem. Take the pawn while you can. Okay, and now you're not out of the woods, but okay, you can take a breath. However, Bobby's going to reformulate his bishops. Nice fork here on either pawn. The problem is this wing. You have to take care of business, right? So, and of course, there's the unblockaded pawn number 1. Rook will take c4, bumping into the bishop. The bishop's going to come here to unblockade the other pawn. The rook is going to go back to b4, and the bishop's going to take a3. Notice the power of the bishop's long-term protection. That's why he couldn't take that pawn. Now it's a slaughter because the bishops are just overwhelming. This is really fantastic how this works. The bishop takes a3. Okay, but acquire a target. You have to try to acquire a target, right? Well, now the king comes into play. There's no reason to give your opponent that pawn. Bring your king. You're in the end game. The king is a fighting piece. This king is better situated than this one, so that's an extra piece. You see how that works? So this is cool. Rook b7, check. Now Bobby is able to realize he can reposition his bishops yet again, which is very beneficial. Just block the check. He's not going to take it. He can't afford to do that. So put your pawn up there, stop that pawn. Yes. Here comes Bobby. The passed pawn, the power of the passed pawn. Now the king must do something. Centralize the king. Centralize the king. Don't bump up to leave yourself an escape. Centralize the king. That's the better way. Even though he's in deep trouble, centralize that king. And now bishop comes to c6. Tickle the rook. Also keep track of that g pawn. That's a good fork. Yeah, the pawn's protected at this point, but do it anyway. And so the rook will come to a7. A7. Why did the rook go to A7? Because rooks belong behind passed pawns. Now, that applies if you had the passed pawn, put your rook behind it and escort it in. Or if your opponent has a passed pawn, put your rook behind it, because that's not a defensive move, that's an offensive move. This does not make you passive. You are able, if you can, to manipulate it so that you can take that pawn powerfully. So this is good. Well, centralization. And now covering the next square. So your pawn can advance. This is masterful how Bobby does this. This is so fabulous. So the king is a fighting piece. I'm going to say that again. Bring your king into this game. Yes. Don't worry about pressing your pawns. You're way too far away to have any influence whatsoever. This is the guy. Yes, you can only get to him one move at a time. Get your king in the game anyway. Right? And now, press. Fundamentally so. Well, now you do have to get off the end row. So you got to bump your king up. But toward the center and off of that. And now look what Bobby does. Here comes Bobby. The king is a fighting piece. Here he comes. Get your king involved in the game. Now he pushes the g4, and the bishop will come to c5. Fantastic centralization. Tickle the rook, centralize your bishop, right? So the rook will come to a5. Now that would have been a great move. I mean, it is a great move, I should say that, but the tactics-wise is, boy, it's a good thing this pawn is covering that bishop, or white would have nabbed him a bishop. So that's kind of a cool tactic. If two bishops are lined up, attack them sideways and you might get one of them. In this case, no, but here's the move. You know right where to put the bishop, because not only is he guarding, but now he's got the queening square. And it was at this point that white resigned. Just a superb illustration of the power of bishops if you can keep the board open. I love that game. That's a great illustrated game. I played through it several times. It's an awesome game. Thanks for watching my Backyard Professor Chess videos. They're a hoot to make. I love it. I appreciate you, my audience. Thank you so much for attending. Class is over. Be good, do well, have fun, work hard, sleep well, and I will see you again in the next Backyard Professor Chess video.